All right, if you're even thinking about a PhD, I need you to listen up because this is probably the most critical decision you're going to make. It's not about what you study, but who you study it with. Seriously, choosing your supervisor is, well, it's everything. So today, we're going to treat this like a real investigation, giving you a handbook to find that perfect person. And hey, don't just take my word for it. Professor Lennart Nake says it all right here. This single relationship, it's going to shape your entire academic journey, not to mention your future career. The stakes are just incredibly high. And this is why it is so important. A massive 50% of PhD candidates in North America never actually finish. And a huge piece of that puzzle, a bad relationship with their supervisor. This isn't just about having a good time in grad school. This is literally about whether you finish or not. Okay, so to nail this, we're going to run it like a proper investigation. First, we'll open the case file on the research match. Then, we'll do some surveillance on their mentorship style. After that, it's all about intel gathering on their career network, running forensics on the money, and finally, we'll go undercover to check out the lab culture and personal fit. Let's get started. First things first, the case file. This is all about the research. Look, it's so easy to get starstruck by a big name, but if their work doesn't genuinely, truly get you excited, you're already on a cold trail. So you've really got to dig deep here. I'm not talking about their greatest hits from 10 years ago. I mean their recent papers. Does reading them actually make you feel something? Is their expertise a perfect match for your niche? And check the evidence. Do people who come out of their lab do great things? But the most important questions are about them and you. Are they actually curious about your ideas? And maybe the most critical question of all, do they actually have time for you? And that really is the bottom line, isn't it? A famous professor who's too busy to ever meet with you is a liability, not an asset. Their reputation is not going to write your thesis for you. Real, actual FaceTime is absolutely non-negotiable. All right, next phase, surveillance. This is where you become a bit of a detective and figure out how they really operate as a mentor, day to day. We're talking less about their research topics and more about their actual management style. So you'll generally find two main types. You've got your hands-on supervisor who loves frequent check-ins, gives detailed guidance, and sets deadlines. Then you've got the hands-off type who expects you to be independent and to come to them when you need help. Now listen carefully, neither one of these is better. The only thing that matters is which one is better for you and how you work. So the big question is, how do you figure out which style they really are? Beyond the polished interview answers. How do you get the real story? Well, you start by completely flipping the script. I love this quote from Emma Beckett. You have to go into every meeting thinking that you are interviewing them. Forget the usual power dynamic. This is your chance to ask direct questions about how they work, how they give feedback. This is your intelligence gathering mission. But let me tell you, your best intel, your secret weapon, will always come from the witnesses, the current and former students. These are the people who will give you the real, unfiltered truth. They've got nothing to lose by being honest, and they can tell you what it's really like. This is probably the single most important step in this whole investigation. Don't skip it. Okay. On to our third phase, intel gathering. A PhD isn't just about writing a thesis, right? It's supposed to be the launchpad for your entire career. And a truly great supervisor isn't just a critic. They are your champion. So what does a real champion look like? Well, the proof is in the pudding. Where are their former students now? Are they landing great jobs in academia or industry? Does this supervisor actually introduce their students to people in their network? Do they push them to go to conferences? And maybe most importantly, do they stick around and support them with references even after they've graduated? Because really, that's the whole ballgame. A supervisor who actively uses their connections and their reputation to open doors for you, that's how good work turns into an amazing career. Okay, let's get down to business. Time for some forensics. We got to talk about money and resources. I know it's not the sexiest part of doing research, but trust me, it is the foundation that everything else gets built on. Professor Nake just nails it here. Your passion for research is crucial, but you can't pay your rent with it. Having a stable funding situation is absolutely essential for your well-being, and honestly, for your ability to do good work without being stressed out all the time. So, this means you need to have a very honest, very direct conversation about the money. Don't be timid. Don't be shy. what are the key questions you absolutely must get answers to? Here's your checklist. Is your position fully funded? And for how long is that money guaranteed? What's the backup plan if a grant suddenly ends? Is there a separate budget for things like travel to conferences or buying software? And what's the deal with you applying for your own funding? Getting these things in writing now can save you from a total disaster later on. And that brings us to our final and maybe most important step, going undercover. This is where we assess the human element, the day-to-day lab culture, the personal vibe, and where we look for those huge, flashing red flags. Red flags are those little gut feelings, those warning signs that tell you something just isn't right. You have to train yourself to spot them early, because I promise you, these things only get worse under the pressure of a PhD. And you'll notice how specific these are. I mean, if they're impossible to schedule a meeting with before you even start, just imagine what it's going to be like later. If they never put their students on papers as co-authors, they're not invested in your career. If all they care about is publishing and not you actually learning skills, that's a huge problem. And maybe the biggest warning sign of all, if you meet the current students and they just seem totally exhausted, competitive, or miserable, run. This is why you absolutely have to trust your gut. That intuition you have during the whole interview process is valuable data. If a dynamic feels weird or disrespectful now, that feeling is going to be magnified 100 times over the next few years. So when it's all said and done, your job is to bring all the evidence together. The perfect supervisor checks all 5 of these boxes. It's someone who shares your passion, whose mentorship style works for you, who will actively champion your career, who has stable funding, and who has built a lab culture where you can actually thrive. Look, you're not just picking a boss here. You are choosing your guide, your mentor, and your main collaborator for what is basically a multi-year intellectual marathon. The investigation you do now will pay off for the rest of your career. So there's really only one question left. Who are you going to choose?